My guest today is Camilla Thompson. Camilla is an integrative nutritionist and health coach with expertise in nutrition, psychology, neuroplasticity, mental health first aid, and epigenetics. She is the founder of The Wellness Coach and Biohacking Coaching, where she supports her clients in their wellbeing and biohacking journeys. She is also the founder of Mould Safe, a mold testing and remediation organisation based in the Central Coast of New South Wales. In addition, Camilla is also a co-founder of Select Wellness, a company that focuses on delivering bespoke mental health and wellbeing programs. I invited Camilla in for a chat to share her personal story of how her own experience with postnatal depression, mold illness, and chronic inflammatory response syndrome has now led to her becoming one of Australia's best known biohacking and longevity experts. I'm really excited to have her share her story. So, without further ado, I warmly welcome Camilla. Camilla, thank you so much for joining me for this chat. I think our audience are going to love hearing about your journey. You have a really interesting way that you've come to appreciate and love biohacking. And so I thought, what would be a better way to start than to ask you to share with us what's been your health journey and how you've come to be a multi-business owner that works in the health space and also, support your own well-being in the process.
Thanks, Bec. It's awesome to join you. And yeah, a multi-business owner. I've not been called that before, so that's a new one, but very true.
Very true.
It is very true. So yeah, look, my biohacking journey started quite a while ago. I grew up with a mum who I call the OG biohacker,
Oh,
who was very progressive. Our house was low tox, pretty much chemical free, fluoride free toothpaste. All of our products were low chemical. All of our food came from local farms, and
wow.
yeah, the quality of our meat and things like that. So I really grew up with that. It was kind of instilled into me from a young age with my mum. She was always coming up with crazy stuff that now has obviously come true. So
Yeah. An
yeah,
early
she
adopter.
she was totally an early adopter. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
she's my OG biohacker. So I learned a lot off her, but of course I rebelled massively.
As you
Particularly
come
as
to.
a kid, I wasn't allowed sugar. I was allowed half a packet of fruit pastels on a Sunday with my sister, which was split in two. And so yeah, I was obviously chasing sugar and chasing things that I was deprived or wasn't allowed.
Yep.
And then went into a bit of a junk food thing in my teens, and then sort of came out of that. And then over the last sort of 15 years since having children and just having getting older, you start going, God, I've got to start looking after my health. So just reverted back to a lot of the foundations that my mum taught me. With my oldest son now, Ollie, who's 21, I suffered really bad postnatal depression, and it went undiagnosed for a long time. And it was only when he was about a year old we moved to Australia, and I just was not coping, and I didn't know anyone, and we'd moved here for work. And yeah, I finally got diagnosed with postnatal depression. I got put on SSRIs.
Hmm.
They made me feel even worse. Caveats, they do help people, but I wasn't on the right ones. And I put on loads of weight. I couldn't get out of bed, and my mental health declined even more than it already was. So I thought, and I was also sort of studying psychology. I was finishing my degree, and I knew something was wrong, but I was like, I can fix myself here. So I came off the SSRIs cold turkey, which I do not recommend. It's not a good
No,
strategy at all. Had a
no.
complete and utter breakdown. Ended up walking around. At the time I was living in Rose Bay in Sydney, walking around Rose Bay in tears, pushing a buggy, and I saw a Chinese acupuncture guy in a little shop, and I went in, and this beautiful man just sat down with me and held my hands, and I was sobbing and sobbing. And
Oh.
yeah, he's just so beautiful. I say he saved my life. Such a kind man,
Mm.
and held my hands and said it'll be okay. Started jabbing needles into me, gave me some Chinese herbs, and said, "Come back and see me in a week." I kept going back and seeing him every week, and slowly I started getting stronger, healthier, more mentally fit. I could get out of bed in the mornings. I started losing weight. I started eating properly. I was walking. I was swimming in the ocean. I suddenly had my kind of joy of life back,
Mhm.
and realized that I needed to, get my shit together, because I had a little baby. Well, he was sort of 18 months to 2 years old by then.
Mm.
And I needed to start looking after myself and him. So that was my first kind of journey into, okay, these drugs aren't going to work for me. I need to find alternative ways to heal myself. So I used obviously Chinese herbs and acupuncture and nature and ocean and diet and all those wonderful things. I then went into 8 years of being chronically ill, and yeah, I was really sick for quite a long time, and no one knew what was wrong with me.
Mhm. So
So
what kind of like what was that for you? What kind of symptoms and things were you experiencing?
yeah, so it was a lot of immune system related stuff. So I'd get constant infections. I had an eye that used to weep and be very itchy and get swollen. I
Mhm.
had sinus issues. I had constant dehydration where I felt like I was permanently hungover, but I wasn't
Mhm.
drinking. So there was no alcohol, but I still felt that horrible feeling.
Yep.
And slowly it got worse and worse, my symptoms. My anxiety was through the roof. My mental health was just not in a good place. And I felt like an old woman. My brain fog was really bad. My body was aching, not too dissimilar to perimenopause
Yep.
symptoms.
Yep.
But I was too young for perimenopause at the time. But yeah, every doctor just said they didn't know what was wrong with me. I did every blood test, loads of scans. Yeah, and just had no answers from modern medicine.
There
So
was nothing detected on your bloods to suggest what was actually going on.
no, nothing. They just kept telling me I was fine. Eventually, a doctor said, I'm afraid this is in your head. You're choosing to be sick. We can't help you. And yeah, I ended up going on a bone broth detox for a week because I was like, I've got to try something here. Like, I feel like crap.
And did that make it worse?
So it made me better for a bit, but then worse.
Uh-huh.
So it made me better for a while because interestingly, I was taking quite a lot of things like clay with this bone broth. It was a whole sort of detox program. And so I felt amazing at the end of it. But then I went downhill massively after about 3 weeks.
Mhm.
And I think some of the histamine in the bone broth as well probably triggered what my symptoms were. So I ended up bedridden. I was like an old woman. Every time I walked, my bones would creak, and I was not in a good way.
Mm.
And a good friend of mine came over to my house, and we'd had some water damage in various parts of our apartment, and particularly in a cupboard in our bedroom. And at this time, I was bedridden, and she found mold everywhere. So I was in my bedroom, I was in my bed, my blinds,
Hours and
my
hours every
cupboards.
day.
Yeah, it was in my home office. I was working in my office, within my kids' bedrooms. It was every room in our house was infected,
Yep.
so with mold.
Right. And then so that began your journey into,
Yeah,
is this my
yeah.
problem?
Suddenly I was like, okay. Now the thing is with mold is only 25% of us have a specific gene, which is part of the celiac family, which is the HLA, DR, or DQ gene. And that means we are susceptible to mold illness. It means we can't actually detox and bind the spores and basically excrete them. We're not able. Our body won't let us do that. It gets confused.
Mm.
So 4 people living in a house, two, I was sick, my younger son got sick, my oldest son and my husband were fine.
Yep.
So we didn't think
And
it was
but
our
your
home.
symptom picture, was it the same as your son that became sick? It was quite different as well. So it was,
Yeah. Yeah, my son's symptoms were sores. He used to get sores on his lip, low energy, a few rashes on his body, but nothing really significant that pointed to mold. Now that I know what I know, it was like, okay, that's obvious signs of mold. But
yep.
really, I had no understanding about how damaging mold was.
Yep.
Within 24 hours, we'd left our home. We couldn't go back. Our entire home was written off, so we lost all our belongings.
Wow.
We had nowhere to live for 3 months. I mean, we were staying in a service like a Meriton apartment, but we had no home. And yeah, it was a pretty traumatic time, to be honest. And
Yeah.
waiting for results, waiting for insurance, trying to find doctors that can actually test for mold is really tough.
Hmm.
But eventually I got diagnosis. And so I've got something called CIRS, which is chronic inflammation response syndrome, which basically is a biotoxin mold illness. And you have it for the rest of your life, but you can manage it.
Yep. It's like an exacerbation or exacerbation to an inflammatory response when you constantly triggered, your immune system's
Yeah.
constantly triggered,
Yeah.
sending up flares all over your body, going, warning, warning, something's not right here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is something I think there's not enough awareness about. And I have spoken a little bit with another expert, Lisa McDonald, about
Mhm.
mold illness. But what a lot of people don't realize is that it can almost look like an early onset dementia for
Yep.
some people, like not always. But it is now one of the first things I think of if people, as people tend to do when they find out you're a naturopath, they'll start asking you questions. You know, what could there be this, or I've got this, or I've got that. And as soon as I start seeing inflammation, unexplained pain, allergy or intolerances, or just reactivity, skin issues,
Yeah,
brain fog, fatigue, mood aberrations as well, that it's one of the first things I ask. And I was saying this to you the last time we spoke, like sometimes people can be really offended, like if you say, is there any chance
yeah.
that you've got an exposure to mold, like as if it's that it's not about being clean or something. But I
Mm,
mean, for some people, mold isn't even visible in
yeah.
the home, and the spores aren't visible. It's not about that. It's just understanding that, you could have these in your home and not even realize it.
100%. And we didn't know. We couldn't see it. It was hidden mold.
Yeah.
And we'd had, water damage over the years, all the storms. It had been patched up by, some dodgy handyman, like nothing had ever been done properly. So you don't know what you don't know. But there is a lot of shame associated with it with people. They feel like there's something wrong with them. It's like, oh, my
Mm,
house has got mold.
mm,
And it's like 1 in 2 homes have mold. Like we are, not all mold is bad. We need
yeah.
it. It's part of our ecosystem. But definitely, yeah, some of the water damage spores are the most damaging. So that's what causes a lot of the illness, the biotoxin illness.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And so then I'd imagine, I mean, that's another thing people don't realize is that it'll then those spores are airborne, and that's why all your belongings that has to go,
yeah.
probably this was a little while ago. There's starting to be a bit more awareness now around moldy building syndromes. But,
Yes.
I'd imagine, like, and then on top of that, you've got all the stress associated with not having somewhere to live and not having all your
Oh,
belongings. And that would have made everything worse as well.
I've called it PTMD, post-traumatic mold disorder.
Yep.
And it's anyone that's been through it will say, oh my God, yeah, it is. It is a form of PTSD, but
Mm,
PTMD, because it's so traumatic. It's like you're going through a natural disaster because you lose your home and all your belongings, but you're also sick.
yeah.
So you've got that added layer of, I spent 18 months in treatment trying to get the mold out of my body. And it was so, I mean, I feel grateful that I had the finances to do it because I spent tens of thousands of dollars getting well on appointments and tests and supplements. And it's expensive. A lot of people can't afford to get well. They have to live with it. And I also had an amazing support. I had an incredible naturopath who also has a mold illness, and that was her background. And I just did everything she told me to do. She said I'm her only client that's ever done everything that she's with in mold, because most of them don't. And if you miss steps and you're not committed to it, you don't heal as well as I have. So it's a commitment.
So in terms of the steps to recovery, like, what does that look like? How do people go about that?
Well, you know what's really interesting? I bought a sauna years and years and years ago when I was in the midst of my illness and I didn't know what was wrong with me. All I knew is every time I got in a sauna, I felt so much better.
Mm,
So that was my first sort of step, was like the sauna, just sweating out every time. For a few days after, I'd feel much better, but then obviously I was still living in mold. So
mhm,
that was one thing that I was trying. And then charcoal was great. But again, I took that for too long and that really started impacting my gut
mhm,
lining. And
mm,
then I was on colostrum as well, which is quite a heavy duty pharmaceutical drug. And a lot of people choose not to take that when they've got mold illness because we're so highly sensitive
mhm.
to so many things. But for me, I gradually just started taking it and it worked.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm happy that I was able to take that. But I had so many food allergies and swollen stomach, and I get ulcers on my tongue. I'd eat certain things and I'd have like welts on my tongue. And yeah, I was so sensitive. Even now, any smells like chemical, I'm chemically sensitive as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So obviously the saunas, you supplementation, and you've started to gain your health back and get on top of things, and then what happened?
Yeah, so I spent 18 months in treatment, and then to To be honest, another thing that really helped, I moved out of Sydney to the Central Coast and moved into by the ocean and in nature. And that's been that's always been a big healing place for me.
Mm.
But yeah, I just got into more biohacking techniques. So just trying things like cryotherapy and hyperbarics and different supplements that have really helped, like things like NAD, NMN. That for me was life-changing last year as I was heading into perimenopause in my brain. Very similar symptoms because I had
Left
such
the
bad brain
building.
fog. Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, I feel like I've got mold poisoning again. But actually, that drop in progesterone and estrogen. But yeah, so different things. I experiment with all different things and see what works. Cryotherapy is great because of chronic inflammation.
Yep.
And obviously, I've just got to be careful. I don't eat any refined sugars because they obviously create a lot of inflammation in the body. I had to really watch alcohol intake, so I don't really drink that much anymore.
Yep.
So it's just managing it. It's ongoing. And I know if I go into a moldy environment that I just need to take zeolite actually has been an amazing thing I've started taking in the last 12 months. And that's really helped. I do that every other day.
Yep.
And then chlorella as well. So just those binders, helping my body to bind and do all those things it should be doing.
Yep. And I would imagine too that, given that you had a lot of things to do with mouth ulcers and, like you said, the bloating and digestive function, that you've had to do a lot of gut work over the years
Oh,
as well.
yeah, 100%. I had leaky gut from mold. Like I had so many gut issues and I'm still not 100% there.
Yep.
I'm actually looking forward to trying gut repair and
Ah,
I want to focus on that for a month and
yeah.
really, yeah, just absolutely see what that does. So I do probiotics, prebiotics. What else do I do for gut? Bit of slippery elm, a few other things. Can't even think what else is. I've got a cupboard full of supplements.
Oh yeah, you and me both. Yeah. Are you
Uh,
even in the health industry if your pantry isn't filled with
Isn't I
supplements?
know. I was actually looking the other day thinking I need more space. I need to set up even more space. But I've reduced down actually so much. I'm now really laser focused on what I'm taking. And I try to take as much as I can in liquid form or powder and water rather than too many tablets.
Yep.
And because I was taking so many, like I wasn't quite at Dave Asprey's 170 wherever he's at a day, which is insanity.
Yeah.
I don't
You've got to have a really robust digestive system as well
Woof.
to cope with that amount of supplement intake. Like, so if your gut's not there, then sometimes it's like, throwing a football down a hallway. Like you can't really achieve much until you've got that gut really optimally functioning.
100%. And also, like, if you're eating a really good quality diet, do we need all those supplements? Like, I kind of, it's a bit of a contention with me at the moment. Like, there are some real key supplements that are so important. And I would not be where I am now health-wise without supplements. There's just no way in a million years. So I'm a massive advocate, but I think just really honing in on the important ones and totally agree. The gut piece is so important. Number one.
I have a lovely colleague that used to always say, supplements are supplements, not
Yeah.
maintenance. And
Yeah.
so, I like to think of them as often that life raft that we need to get from point A to point B. Like you said, you wouldn't be here without
Mm.
them. But fundamentally, the goal is to kind of achieve it with diet and lifestyle wherever possible. Now, where that becomes challenging nowadays is around, the quality of our food
Oh,
supply and what have you. Like that is,
it's a problem.
yeah, that is the
Yeah.
unfortunate reality,
Yeah.
isn't it? That animals are raised poorly, which leads to poor quality meats and poor quality fatty acids, and the
Oh,
farming techniques are, stripping out soils, which is making us all really quite deplete in minerals. So there's lots of aspects to that. Like, yes, we ideally want everything from diet, but it's
it's just hard. And
not always achievable.
a lot of people will say that. They'll say, "Oh no, I don't need anything," or "Oh, I eat salmon twice a week." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's like if it's not wild salmon, it's full of absolute crap. It's one of the most toxic foods you can eat, and you're not getting the proper fats that you need from that." But yeah, it's hard. And a lot of people, they just don't know what they don't know. It's an education piece. But yeah, our soil is not great. Like all my veg comes from farmers markets. Like it's just a decision I make. And I get up early on a Sunday and I'm committed to it because I know it's good for me and my health and my family. But it does, you know, we need access to it, and we're lucky that we have access. A lot of people don't.
Mm.
But it's absolutely so important. So I think those basics, I call them the biohacking basics. I've
Yep.
got a talk on that, and I'm actually writing a book, which should be out next year, I hope, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But it is about those foundations. It's the basics. You
Yep.
know, sleep is just a non-negotiable for me.
Mm.
It's absolutely, you know, I'm a 9:30, 10 o'clock's a late night for me. Um, you know, and I like to get up early and have that sunlight, set my circadian rhythms in the morning. So that natural light, you know, nutrition is just an absolute non-negotiable. Saunas every other day, cold showers every day, my supplement protocol. You know, these are kind of the baseline for me. And being in nature and sun, you know, I have 20 minutes in the sunshine if I can every day at least. Yeah.
Yeah, and that might list might be sounding overwhelming to some people, but if we think back to just a few generations ago, a hot shower wasn't the norm, and artificial light in the morning wasn't the norm, and
Yep.
the light from your phone wasn't the first light that you saw from the day, and you would have been always in contact with the ground, the earth, nature, whether you were
Yeah.
finding foods to eat, foraging for foods, working in the land and doing all of that stuff. So we've as a society, we've often lost touch with that, and worse so for the city dwellers. Like, it probably makes sense why you felt
Mm.
better moving from kind of like the
Yeah.
city more to
Mm.
the Central Coast, which, I mean, I'm not going to call it the country, but it's not as city like. There's not
No.
as much concrete as there is in Sydney.
Yeah, it's definitely more rural. And particularly where I am, I just look out at trees and water, and I'm very lucky. But yeah, I felt a massive shift in my nervous system, just moving, the anxiety. I mean, we moved just before COVID, or just at COVID, whilst COVID was starting, but the anxiety, the collective anxiety, particularly where I was in the eastern suburbs, and the rushing and the busyness, and you're constantly wired and running on cortisol. And it's just, you don't realize till you step away and you're like, oh my God, like, I can't believe I was operating like that. It's yeah, we definitely, that rest piece has become really important in slowing down for me
Mm.
and taking time to recharge. So
There is good evidence for time in nature improving
mm,
the nervous system, and also, like, the connection with others and how that can kind of rub off on us. There's some fascinating scientific explorations of that to validate what you felt like from stepping away from it as well, that I
yeah,
think not a lot of people realize. Like, we make these castaway comments of like, just move myself from toxic environments or toxic people, and oh, suddenly I feel better, but actually it's very real.
it is.
It's very
Yeah.
tangible, and it makes a profound difference in your outlook and the way you think about things, and the way you approach things. Is that if somebody is close to you and they've got a problem with this, then suddenly you've got a problem with this. This is society, and I think this is why we see such a massive shift in, like, the amount of people that are suffering with stress and anxious
Mm.
symptoms.
Yeah, 100%. I just read a book called, there it is, The Vagus Nerve Reset. And it's such a great book. I read it in about a week because it was so interesting. But it talks about how our nervous system mirrors other people's nervous systems as well, and how we pick up on those energies. And I'm a really sensitive energy person. I can
Mm,
feel if something's off, even if I speak to someone on the phone, I can hear it in their voice.
mm,
Which is the nature of the work that I do, I guess, in the coaching space as well, that I sort of pick up on those things. But yeah, our nervous system is so complex and so sensitive, and we don't realize how much we're taking on and absorbing and carrying around with us.
mm.
And that leads to ill health, right? And dis-ease in the body is when our nervous system and our gut is dysregulated.
Absolutely. And if the gut and nervous system, which are probably more the outward physical signs, then there's a very good possibility that your vagus nerve is disturbed also.
Mm, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
fascinating topic. We had an interview with Emrys Goldsworthy on that, who I've known
Mm,
for a lot of years, who was the first person to bring things like the vagus nerve and photobiomodulation and low-level
mm,
laser therapy to my attention, which in and of themselves now would be considered biohacks. But that he's also written a book on that, and it's an absolutely fascinating nerve, like, that has a touch
oh,
point throughout the entire
yeah.
body, like from top to bottom, every organ system. And although it's most widely known as that kind of gut brain connection, that actually does a lot more, like respiratory function and heart rate
Mm.
variability. And these are the reasons why we can use these kinds of tools to measure our well-being, is like it's got a lot to do with the vagus nerve and the way it senses our environment.
Mm. And it's linked to our voice box, which I didn't realize. I learned that as well. And so that's why humming and singing and all those things are so soothing for
Yes.
the body, because we're actually soothing and activating the vagus nerve. So yeah, I think more people are talking about it now, but I remember sort of mentioning it years ago in some of my talks, and people were just like, "Well, I've never heard of it." But I
Yeah.
think now it's becoming more mainstream and people are understanding so much more about the body.
Mm,
It's, I'm 47, and this year I have learned more about my body through hormones at 47. And I'm like, why did I not know this at 18 or 16? Why wasn't I taught this in school?
mm,
Like understanding estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, and understanding the female body and what happens to us and what happens to women as we age, and that how important estrogen is. I
mm.
always thought it was the enemy because of what you read in the media. And, I remember my mum even recently said to me, oh, estrogen gives you breast cancer. And, like, it's just, we've been so lied to and let down by, yeah, by GPs and doctors who just don't seem to really understand the female body. They don't even learn about it properly. They don't learn about menopause or perimenopause in their training. It's
Yeah,
brilliant.
or it's a very small,
The
it's a
small
very
section.
small section of a very like expansive
Yeah.
course. So, it might only be, and I see this happen a lot on videos on social media. Like you'll say, doctors will be like, I probably spent barely a week
Yeah.
discussing menopause, and I probably spent barely a week discussing nutrition. And yet they're so fundamental to our well-being, and like we can possess these vessels and have like actually no idea how they function. And when you start to understand it, you get this whole new appreciation for the way you treat it, what you put in your mouth, how you think about the world, how you engage with others, how you respond, or how you approach different situations. Like once you start to have that knowledge, I think it completely changes your perspective on life.
Yeah. It totally does. It really does. It was interesting. I went to the biohacking conference in Dallas this year. Dave
Yes, how
Asprey.
was that? I didn't even know that was
Y'all.
on until you
Yeah.
mentioned it.
I know. Well, do you know, there's 6 conferences this year. So there was one in Dallas, one in Austin, all done by different people. One in London, one in Singapore, one in Japan, and one in Helsinki. And that they were within 3 months of each other, pretty much.
Yep.
And in Australia, like, it's like crickets. There's no
Yep.
nothing. I'm trying to hopefully do something next year and do a bit of a biohacker summit
That would be
with
cool.
with Azra, yeah, from Biohacker on the Gold Coast. So we're kind of trying to talk to Dave Asprey, and there's a few other people as well, to see if we can do something a bit smaller scale here next year, but in a way that we can do it as a place where people can come and try different technologies. We can educate them about supplements. We can have amazing speakers.
Mm,
Definitely have to have you guys involved. But
love
it's
that.
yeah, but it's like people want to know. Like, I held that biohacking meetup last night, and people were just so curious and inquisitive and so many questions, and people are
What are the
taking
kinds
their
of
own.
questions people are asking? Like where is the interest in it? Is it mostly around brain fog, like this kind of epidemic we feel of brain fog, or is it other things?
Yeah, a lot of it's gut. So we talked a lot about gut, brain. People just are taking their health into their own hands now. There's a massive lack of trust now with big pharma and GPs. And so people are going, actually, I need to look after myself. What does that look like? So I think a lot of people, their first port of call is kind of Dave Asprey, because he's quite well known. And then they start going into different Huberman and Sinclair and all the different people that they kind of start learning. But
But
yeah, I think
those
people are
guys are
just curious.
really far down the rabbit hole.
Oh,
Like, they're
so far
nearly
down.
up to a decade
I
into
know.
being a biohacker. So, they're in a very different sphere
Yep.
to, I guess, where some others may be in that kind of beginning phase. Like somebody
Yep.
needs to nurture that category of people as well.
Totally. And that's kind of what my mission is just kind of take some of the complex science and ideas and really make them accessible and simplified so that people can understand and they don't feel too overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's the thing. People are overwhelmed by well-being. Like
Yeah.
it's another thing on their to-do list. It's like, oh, I've got to do this and this, but it's a lot of it's about mindset. Like I think for me, my biggest thing was I lived in fear for many years that I was going to get sick again and I was going to come into contact with mold and I wouldn't go to my friends' houses. And
Mm,
if I knew they had mold, I wouldn't go to shopping centers, cinemas, if they'd had water damage, because I was so paranoid.
of
And
course.
I've, yeah, but I eventually moved through that fear because that's the biggest problem. It's holding you back and it's creating so much stress in the body. So I really switched my mindset. And I think, that's when it comes to health, mindset is everything. You've got to really believe, you've got to be hopeful, you've got to be curious, you've got to be up for self-experimentation and understand and trust your body, that your body
Mm,
can heal, that can heal with the right kind of support and guidance. You can heal.
100%. And so when it comes to like mindset, do you have specific things that you do, like journaling, or like how do you approach that?
A lot of it, most of the time I talk to myself out
Like
loud.
affirmations and self-talk.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do
it's not to
affirmations. I've
be
got,
underestimated.
but also it's apparently the first sign of madness, but I think it's the
Uh,
first sign of brilliance. So I get a lot of my clients to talk to themselves and just call themselves out. So a
mm,
lot of the stuff's challenging, right? So it's challenging those thought patterns, those beliefs, and some of that meaning that we've made over things over the years, and actually challenging what's true and what's not, and trying to shift. So using that neuroplasticity to create those new neural pathways.
mm,
So I did a bit of study in neuroplasticity and epigenetics, and I've kind of implemented a lot of that into my own life. And then I use that for my coaching clients. So yeah, I don't do too much journaling. What I'll do is if stories keep repeating themselves, I'll write them down and then I'll sort of start challenging and understanding what's coming up for me.
mhm.
But I came up with something called the hope mindset, which is not about just blind faith and that everything's going to work out, but it's actually about, okay, if I'm hopeful in my outlook and my mindset, what does that look like? What's my plan? What am
Yep.
I going to do to get to where I need to get to? So then using that hope mindset to get through.
Yep. One might
Yeah.
also call that manifesting, which
Yeah.
is, also a bit of a buzzword, but
Yeah.
the premise is the same, like thinking about yourself positively in the place or the goal that you're attempting to reach. And
Yeah.
sometimes just by having that in front of mind, it therefore you take the steps you need to get there because you're more consciously aware of it.
Yeah, totally. Like I'll say things to myself like, Camilla, trust yourself, trust your body. You've got this. You can heal.
Mm.
Don't go down that rabbit hole. And I find that so useful talking to myself like that because I'm actually becoming an observer of my thoughts and my emotions, and I'm taking a step back and I'm able to be a bit more objective around what's going on. So that really works for me. I find naming, labeling, challenging, and just coming back to that mindset of being hopeful.
Yeah, I like that. And it's obviously paying off because, you definitely, even just in the short time I've come to know you, I've been watching you succeed and achieve goals and do various things with, your outreach on social media and, kind of extending this message of, we can take this personal um hold on our well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. And I set up a mold business last year, testing and remediation and removal on the Central Coast because there was no one doing it properly. And I just had
Mhm.
people coming to me all the time saying, help, I've got mold issues. So one of my good friends that found the mold in my house in Rose Bay, she's moved up the coast and we've set a business up here and it's doing great. I mean, I can't get too involved. I'm more in the back end because obviously I
Yeah.
can't get into people's moldy houses. But yeah, I've always been of service. I think particularly the last sort of 8 years, I've worked in mental health and wellbeing in the corporate space. I just love helping people. I love the transformation.
Mm.
And I just love watching people switch mindsets and change and become empowered to look after their health. So that's kind of my mission and my purpose is really to help people to supercharge their lives and really get the best out of what they can and yeah, have a really good health span and
Well, mold
Mhm.
illness is certainly not going anywhere, nor is CIRS. I think that
No.
as more awareness grows about those conditions, like there's only going to be more people that realize they have them who then realize they need support. So it's
Mhm.
such a great space to be in, especially when you're always going to be such a great advocate and a great ex subject matter expert when you've kind of been through the ringer with it yourself as well. Like some of the
Yeah.
best kind of healing practitioners are the ones who've, kind of gone through that personal journey and understand what the people that they're helping are going through. Like that level of
Mm.
empathy is second to none. And I guess as a bit of a final wrap up question, is, obviously you mentioned them at the beginning, some of those daily kind of practices you go through, but what are your non-negotiables? What are the things that you're like, that made such a profound difference to me, I'm going to do that forever?
Yeah. Well, I think one of them was NMN, definitely last year was like I just went from sort of functioning at one level to on like steroids. Like it was just incredible. My brain suddenly just lit up in so many different places.
Right.
My energy went through the roof. My metabolism started working better. Like it was an absolute game changer for me.
Yep.
So that NAD supplementation is something I'll continue to do. I
Yep.
take breaks and then I slump again and then I go take it off. Then I take it again. So that's just a non-negotiable. Saunas or non-negotiable, cold showers, at least 7 or 8 hours sleep. I don't eat any refined sugars, just really nutrient dense foods. But also just having a bit of fun and play. And like at the conference I went to, one of the key themes there was about oxytocin and how that's one of the key drivers for longevity, and how we need to have more love and play and sex and all these things in our life to live a long, healthy life. So
So finding
it's
a way to bring that kind of joy into every day,
yeah, and
now
I
non-negotiable.
I have a joy list and I get my clients to create a joy list, and you just
I
have
love
to
that.
tap in and do one thing a day that brings you joy. And it could be something so simple, like just hanging out with your pet or watching
Yep.
the sunrise or just sitting in the sun for 10 minutes or just doing something that brings you joy, read a book.
Mm. It's a
Um,
very individual thing. Some people
it
really enjoy
is.
cleaning. It's not my thing, but some
Well,
people that brings them great joy.
it's dopamine, all right?
Yeah.
So it's like that
Something that
makes
gives you that hit.
it's the dopamine thing. Just one last thing actually I was going to mention is the conference. I didn't really answer your question properly. I jumped into having a conference in Australia. It was so interesting, the conference, because it was in a hotel. It wasn't in nature. And we started at like 7, 8 a.m. in the morning and finished at 6, 7 o'clock at night. And we were inside all day in not natural light. There was no sunlight, no fresh air at,
Mhm.
at a Sheraton hotel. And there was amazing technologies, but everyone was not feeling great because you weren't actually outside at all. You were like 3 days, you were in, artificial lighting and all the
Indoors.
rest of it and
Yep.
indoors. So it was a really interesting experience. And, some of the stuff that they're doing in America and that they talked about that, some of the treatments you can only get done in Mexico and Dubai and Thailand, and some of the really out there gene therapy and stem cell stuff. That
Mm,
was so interesting.
I bet.
But Australia is so conservative. I mean, I think we're years and years behind even the US. And yeah, we are a long way away from some of the other countries and some of the technologies. But, Brian Johnson came on and he looked like a robot. And you kind of go, like, this is so extreme, some of this biohacking. And
Mhm.
I really want to keep it real. And yeah, make sure people are doing the foundations, because otherwise people get overwhelmed. And it's a lifestyle. It's not just about trying one thing.
Mm,
It's biohacking as an ongoing lifestyle. So
mm. Well, you make a very good point. So we're going to expect that the Biohacking Summit of Australia will be
oh
out
gosh.
in nature, so we all get sunshine and fresh air and connection with the
Yeah,
earth.
I know.
Because yeah, that's been identified as something that
It has to be. It's so important.
yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. It's like kind of when you go to a lot of companies have changed this practice now, but in my earlier years as a naturopath, you would go to like conferences or seminars and learning, and then they just have these terrible food that they
Oh,
would do,
yeah.
and it's like so at odds with the group of people that you're there. I think people are starting to cotton onto that, like the
Yeah.
event creators are starting to realize like you've got to deliver an event that from the moment they arrive to the moment they leave and everything in between, it kind of
Mhm.
needs to be on brand for whatever
Exactly.
the topic of the event is. And if it's nutrition or if it's biohacking, well, then it makes sense. Sunshine, sunlight, good food, good this, good that, good
Yeah.
company. I think that would be the best
Yeah.
outcome, that you come away from it feeling energized and uplifted and not like, oh my God, now I need a 3-day break to
Yeah.
get over it.
Yeah, exactly. It should be more of a retreat experience, you know, where you're nurtured and nourished and you come away feeling like, wow, I'm really recharged.
Yeah, and can I sign up and get my ticket next year?
Yeah, exactly. So I know now pressure's on to try and find a venue. No, we're very lucky in Australia. We've got such beautiful venues.
Absolutely. Well, in addition to building your big plans with biohacking, what else have you got on the horizon? A book you mentioned?
Yes, so I'm writing a book. I'm just in discussions with a couple of publishers on that. So that's Biohacking Basics. So that's really just educating people on the foundations, giving them lots of it's a practical guide.
Mhm.
So just want people to be able to really embrace the biohacking lifestyle without it seeming too unrealistic
Yep.
or not accessible. Because I think, you know, as you said, like in a lot of people, 10 years they've been doing this in the US, biohacking, and elite athletes have been biohacking for so long,
Mm,
but it's now becoming more mainstream. And I think, you know, particularly from a healing perspective, people are looking for alternatives. You know, they want to speed up injuries that they might have, and using hyperbaric or
mm.
whatever, cryo, whatever it might be. So I just think we're living in such an exciting time of technology, but at the same time, we need to keep embracing nature. And I always get a bit concerned with people who are constantly got Bluetooth attached to them and, you know, Aura rings and Apple watches and AirPods in their ears. And so it's like constant Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and that's
Mm.
not good for our health either. So it's a bit of a
No.
balance, isn't it, between, yes, let's embrace technology, but also we need to really understand that it's actually impacting our body as well, this constant.
Well, yeah, we're like potentially the canaries in the coal mine. Like we're the first lot of people to kind of live in this this level of technology, like that's all around us. So we're kind of a bit guinea pig, whether we like it or not, and we don't know what we don't know. We are currently unconsciously incompetent in the knowledge that we might have 5 years from now as to, oh, okay, that was a good or a bad idea, or maybe we shouldn't have
Yeah,
done this. Or we just don't know yet. It's
we
too
don't.
new.
We are being experimented upon. I totally agree. And I think we can't live in fear or anxiety around that. I think we've just got to minimize what we can, right? As we've got to look what's within our control and that sphere of control and what can we influence and change. And if we can't, we need to just let it go, because there's no point freaking out about 5G towers if there's nothing we can do about it. But what can we do in our own home to minimize our exposure?
Mm.
So yeah,
Yep,
we'll see.
agree. If you've got 8 hours inside your house and you're exposed, how many hours do you need to dedicate to walking on the beach or
Yeah, to
for, for
counteract. Exactly.
to
Yeah, I love it.
balance the scales and tip them in the right direction? We almost need like a paint by numbers sheet. Okay, this many hours we've spent doing this, and now to offset it, we need to do that.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, I say to most of my clients, you need half an hour of walking to counteract all the sitting. There is some research behind that.
Yep.
But I agree. It'd be like, okay, you need to ground for 10 minutes because you've been exposed to Wi-Fi all day. So get your feet on the grass or the
Yeah.
sand. Or, yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's what we need. And, maybe you can pop that section for that into your book.
Oh, God. I just keep adding things. I was
Yeah.
just saying to Azra as well, who's the other female biohacker in Australia, but we need to do some kind of a course as well for people, some kind of a like, you know, masterclass on biohacking. But I think there's a real opportunity. I think people are eager. They want to learn in Australia. They're keen to understand what's going on. So
Yeah, I think there's definitely an audience for it here. And so
mm.
on that note, let people know where to find you so they can find you. I will put links and things in our show notes, but for the people that are just listening, how do they find you and follow along with you so that when your book and your courses and all the things are available, they'll know about it?
And my
Yes, your
multi-business
multi-business.
is, gosh, there you go. Well, Mold Safe is one of my mold businesses. So if anyone's got mold issues, but we're predominantly Central Coast, in New South Wales. Biohack Me is my brand. So www.biohackme.com.au, and everything's on there. You can download my free biohacking guide as well, which is about
Perfect.
a 30-page guide. So yeah, jump on and do that. And I've also got a brand called the Wellness Coach. So that's my other one. I think I was one of the OG wellness coaches about 12, 13 years ago when I got the name, because that's my actual name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's me. And then obviously I'll give you some links and stuff to put in the show notes.
Perfect. I will add those in. So thank you so much for this chat and sharing, this metamorphosis of health journey that you've been on and how you've arrived at looking and feeling as great as you so very clearly do.
Oh, thank you. It was lovely to chat. And yeah, I'm so grateful to be healed. And I understand a lot of people are struggling with chronic illness, and there is so much that is within our control and so much we can do. So please reach out with any questions. If anyone's got any mold questions, I'm always happy to answer them.
Mm,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Lovely to connect. Bye.